I've been relatively well behaved recently with buying plants. Keyword there is relative. Hi, my name is Memo, this is my channel, Houseplantygoodness, and essentially it's a place where I like to geek out about my big passion. You might be able to see some of it behind me, it's tropical houseplants. But yeah, as I was saying, I've been good about not buying some plants, but last week I may have had a moment of weakness. It's been a stressful few weeks, so I wanted to buy myself some happy from the local garden centre. And if you're watching, hopefully you are, there was somebody's other half that was visiting Norfolk, the place where I live, and they actually sent me a message. It was so sweet. They sent me a message saying, my partner always watches your channel, and I know they always mention about that one garden centre that you always go to, and we're visiting the area. I'm really sorry to bother you with this, but any chance you could tell me which one it is, because I'd love to surprise that individual by taking them to that garden centre. And I'm just like, oh, that is so sweet. That is a great partner there. So yes, obviously I did say, but I went to that local garden centre and I may have picked up a few plants. I also will give you a bit of a quick update on some other plants in my collection that are doing interesting things at the moment, but ones that you haven't seen for a while. So stick around with that in the second part of this video. But yes, let me talk you through some of the recent purchases. And actually, let's start with this one. So, I know a lot of people have issues with this one specifically, so I'll bring it in so you can kind of see it. This is the Alocasia. I'm trying to see if there's any mealybugs. No, that's fine. That's just like perlite, because anybody that knows. This is the Alocasia Antoro velvet, I think. And you can see the backs of the leaves as well. And this is an interesting one because this is one that I've only ever seen online. And when I was seeing it, usually for much bigger plants, when they came into the market probably a year or two ago now, I'm just like, they don't look great. They don't look great. And I knew the velvety thing, and I'm just like, how velvety is it really gonna be? Blah, 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 blah. It is very, very, very petable. Very petable. So tick for that one. And this is more like a true velvety feel rather than, you know, when you get the velvety kind of like Queen Anthurium. This is, I don't know how to describe this. This reminds me more of suede. This reminds me more of velvet. It's got very, very fine little hair-like structures. I'll see if I can take a picture really close up, depending on how crappy my camera is going to be, and put it here so you can kind of see. But the feel of this plant is insane. The other thing that I didn't quite grasp is quite how dark it is as a plant. So that's another big thing in its favor for me. Now you might be looking at this going, well, no, it looks a bit weird. So I am experimenting with some of my Alocasias because I've had good success. And I know that I am very, very, very late to this party, which is, and this might not look like it, but this is the only way that I'm willing to experiment with it, which is that closed vessel sphagnum moss and LECA kind of growing condition for a lot of Alocasias. So what I have done differently, obviously this is not a closed vessel because I can take it off, but I do have LECA at the bottom there as a layer. There is a water reservoir at the bottom that they are sitting through. And also instead of sphagnum moss, because sphagnum moss makes me exceptionally nervous, especially in situations like this, especially with the coming months of autumn and winter. This makes me very nervous if it was going to be sphagnum moss, because it will compact, it will dry out, or it will stay sapping wet for far too long. It makes me nervous. So what I have done instead of that is I am using tree fern fibre as the substrate media that the roots, the original roots, will go into, and then the rest of it is all the same. But the reason why I also wanted this to not necessarily be a closed vessel is because things are going to get a bit different, especially in the autumn and winter. And again, this is based on my assumptions. I do need to do some further research on people that have been growing it this way around. I've seen videos come up for me as well on YouTube or on Instagram or even on TikTok of people growing within these conditions, but there's very rarely, or at least the ones that I've seen, have never mentioned what the situation is like in the winter. So what I'm hoping to do in the kind of coming months now, as it's going to start getting darker and colder, is I'm going to let the water reservoir go dry instead of now where I'm just topping up the water reservoir when it drops too low, because obviously summer and it's warmer and it's sunnier and all of these things. What I will then do is I will let the water reservoirs gradually go dry and then go off the actual moisture level of the substrate. So in this case, the tree fern fibre. And only when that starts to go dry, but not fully dry for alocasias, I will then not water from the top, but I will refill the reservoir and I will rinse and repeat, and hopefully that might work. If you have done this and you've already spent a winter with this type of setup and you know that it needs to be different, do let me know. I'm very, very curious. But yes, so first one is the Alocasia Antoro velvet. Very, very cool plant. One that truly surprised me. And let's stay with the alocasias and the dark alocasias specifically. This is the Alocasia Black Magic, I think it is. So if you look at the back of the leaves, very, very cool. I think when I saw this online, because it was sold at the garden center and there's a new leaf that's coming in already. This one didn't have a new leaf when I first bought it. Same setup as the one that I was talking about before, and I can see the roots are starting to grow in, which I am super happy about. I don't want to jostle it too much. And yes, I did do the thing that I was kind of talking about in my alocasia video where I'm just like, maybe don't do this, but I had no other choice with these plants. I had to get them out of the media, but it was a calculated risk of me jostling the roots around a bit and doing it now when it's kind of like the height of its growing season. I know we're about to go into a season where it's not the growing season, but it's less risky generally to do these types of things once and also do them at this stage rather than it's in the depths of winter. And I'm still expecting these to be knocked back for a bit. And then I was even happy to lose most of these leaves and it's fine. Sorry, but yes, the name of this, Alocasia Black Magic, I think it's infernalis. I might be wrong. But it's interesting because this one, when I was buying it, the label on the original plant pot was handwritten, and a lot of their other labels are printed, especially when they're coming in from nurseries. Generally speaking, with that garden center, if it's handwritten, I know they also propagate a lot of their own plants, and the handwritten labels tend to signify that it's one of their plants rather than one from growers. So I'm pretty sure this is one of their plants. They probably got some in from a grower, they got some corms out of it, and they then have their own plants. But so far, I'm really surprised and really impressed with this one. The leaves are very, very dark. You do get that purpliness. Hopefully this is going to come up well on the screen. It's interesting because actually looking at these leaves, there's some ridges, and hopefully that might come up well on the screen. This is very reminiscent of the texture, a much more muted version of the texture and a much more glossy and leathery, but the same kind of texture that you get with the Alocasia cuprea, if that makes sense. So you've got that really interesting sinus connection at the top, and you've got some ribs that are coming down. Very, very, very cool. I do think this is technically a dual Alocasia, so I don't expect this to get absolutely huge. I think the Antoro velvet can get a bit bigger because I have seen bigger specimens, but I've not seen that many big specimens of this. So remains to be seen, but one that I'm definitely kind of looking forward to growing. And you know me and my dark foliage plants, like I'm a sucker for anything that's like black or like close to black color. And this just spoke to my soul. So I had to pick this one up. And then something that people might be surprised, because I think a lot of people have asked me whether or not I've got this plant and assumed that I had. I didn't. I have got the Geogenanthus ciliatus, I think it is. Yeah, ciliatus, I've got the name down below there. And hopefully that's coming up well on the camera. If not, I'll put a picture somewhere there. So stinking pretty. And I'll come in a bit closer so you can kind of see the plant a bit better as well. So I don't know, I've not done enough research on this. I do need to do some further research on this, but I don't know if that kind of what looks like it could be almost like variegation of the lighter parts of the leaves. I can see that they go a bit duller as it kind of matures and fully hardens off. There are 2 growth points on here. So there's one little plant here and one plant here. This one is arguably a bit bigger in terms of its leaves. And you can see there's so many different colors. And actually, if you look at the back of the leaves, they're kind of like a pinkish color. So from the research that I did, I would imagine that this needs similar light levels to what I've got my Libicea turtleback. And the good thing with that, remember we were saying about the Libicea turtleback, it is one that needs a bit more specific kind of type of light, so kind of more medium to medium bright indirect light. So this would be the same, I would imagine. Did I repot this into a soil mix that I am comfortable with? Yes. But that also gave me a chance to look and see what the roots look like with this. And these roots look kind of similar. And I'm trying to see how I'm going to describe this. Not quite like begonia roots, but you know, sometimes when you get kind of fuzzy stemmed ferns, like the rabbit's foot fern. Similar to that, but it's the roots that's in there, and it's got some really dense little kind of rootlets that are coming off that main central root itself, but the little rootlets almost look a bit like hairs. So that was really interesting to see this, because that gave me an understanding of what it needs in terms of its substrate. And it would be a slightly denser mix. So this is still just a standard houseplant mix. This is still 50-50 perlite cocoa coir with a tiny bit of supplemental orchid bark in there, but nothing too major, because based on seeing those roots, this doesn't need to be in an Anthurium soil mix. It doesn't need anything that airy. This needs something that it can retain some of that moisture around its leaves. So far, this is doing okay. And I'm saying so far because I know that these specific plants aren't the easiest to take care of. And by and large, even though the Geogenanthus plants are really, really pretty, they can be quite challenging for people, either when it comes to light or watering, all of these things. So I bought this knowing the risk that I was going into, and it was more of a bit of a challenge. I'm just like, well, the Libicea turtleback is doing really well for me. Let's see if I can keep this happy, because this is a plant, or Geogenanthus as a kind of group of plants, I think it's a genera, that I've been wanting to try for a while. And I know they've got like a dark foliage one, because see previous 2 plants that I would want to try, but I want to see if I can get this one happy. Arguably, if you've got this, and you might tell me, you know what, Memo, you went for the hardest one because it's got all those kind of almost variegated sections on the leaves, that's fine. I understand it, but this is the only option they had there, so this is the one that I picked up. I don't think it was massively expensive. Hopefully throughout this video I'll put prices. I can't tell you the pot size because it's not a website, and I'm not really good at going, oh yes, I look at that pot and it's like 2 inches big, or like this pot is 6 inches. I don't know. I've been doing this for so long, I still don't have measurements. Also inches, I don't do inches, I do centimeters, because metric system in Greece, but I don't know. But yes, very, very, very pretty plant. Super happy to have this, and so far, so good. It's not been with me for very long, but so far, so good. Do not go on my experiences with this plant, because I know that this plant might need slightly higher levels of humidity. I don't ever think about humidity when it's coming into this space, because I know that by and large, this whole conservatory might as well be a grow tent or a terrarium, because it's got really good levels of humidity. So I don't even think about it twice. If you are taking this and putting this somewhere in like a household conditions, do a bit of research, because I think this does need a certain level of humidity to be happy. And you knew that Anthurium was going to be somewhere on this list. Don't lie. You know me too well at this point. So they had a really cute little, and I'm trying to look at the roots and see how they're doing. They're doing okay, actually. I am happy with that. This is the Anthurium Dorayaki, I think. And it's a plant that I've always been curious about, but I've never come across it, or when I did come across it, I'm just like, this doesn't excite me necessarily. I don't know if I want it. It looks like a lot of other anthuriums, but this I think was a relatively decent price. And I mean, it's a baby plant, so it's fine. I did completely remove the soil media that it was in because it was in just straight up coco coir. And I'm just like, no, 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 not for an anthurium, thank you very much. But net pot with Soil Ninja's anthurium mix. And the thing that I'm doing, and it's working quite well actually in my space now, is I've given it a cache pot just because obviously it's still going to get, it's a very large cache pot, so it's got quite a bit of air underneath it. It's never going to sit in water even if it drips in there. But it's something that seems to be doing okay. And I've put this close to where my Luxurians crossed with the Radicans is sitting because I know that that is getting just about the right amount of light. And this is getting just about the right amount of light. My biggest issue in this space is that it's possibly a bit too bright for a lot of anthuriums. So a lot of the times with these anthuriums, I need to shove them into nooks and crannies where there's decent light, but not as bright as it would be if they were a bit more exposed in my space. So far, so good. Obviously, as soon as I got this, there was a new leaf coming in, which is this one. I don't want to handle it too much. But as soon as I got this, I'm just like, oh, I can see thrips. And it wasn't from the garden center. This was from my space because there's a couple of plants now that have got thrips. So I'm handling that again. Before anybody asks, I'm not messing around with anything else this year. I'm just doing systemic at this point because I just don't have the time nor the patience to be dealing with anything else. So that's what's happening. But yes, the Anthurium Dorayaki. And I think when I was looking at this online, I don't think this is an actual species. I think Dorayaki might be a region of the world and there's anthuriums that are from there. I'm not entirely sure. I might correct myself here if I'm entirely wrong. And again, I bought this being sold as a Dorayaki before anybody comes up and says, this is not a Dorayaki, it's X, Y, and Z. I'm just like, okay, tell me what you think it might be and then I can do some further research. Does it look a bit, and I think that was my issue with the Dorayaki as well. I'm just like, it looks very crystallinum-esque. And I've got other crystallinums. But for this price, I'm just like, you know what, let's give it a try. Let's see what it's like. Let's see if I enjoy growing the Anthurium Dorayaki. So those were the new arrivals. Obviously, I've not owned them for very long, so I can't tell you how well or badly they're going to do in this space with my care. But the ones that I want to talk about now have been in my care and in my space for a while. So I can give you a few updates on how some of these are doing. And as I promised, some of these you haven't seen for a while. Renee, this is one that you'll probably be appreciating the update for. So, talking about that one specifically. This plant is what is currently my Monstera ghost, I think. A white monster, not ghost, white monster. This is Kunzo's white monster, basically. And it's so damn annoying. Because again, this is another thing that this came out of the propagation. Let me give you some context before I start yammering on. This was in my propagation box for a while because it was down to a single leaf and the roots were never particularly happy. So that is why you're seeing these petioles quite as large as they are. So it grew one leaf in my propagation box and I waited until it got a second leaf. So that was the first leaf that it grew and it's losing a lot of that mintiness. The newest one doesn't even have that much. I might need to chop it back quite soon. I'm going to let it grow for a tiny bit. I might have made it revert all the way back. I don't know. But it finally had some decent roots and I have taken the executive decision to put it in a net pot with a Monstera soil mix from Soil Ninja and I am trying it out. But the thing I was going to say, this sits next to the Dorayaki. This also had thrips as soon as it came out of the propagation box. So this also got treated with systemic because I'm not dealing with it. The annoying thing is I was seeing it just a moment ago, I was seeing an adult thrip like prattling on around it, basically. So if the systemic has happened to function fast enough, I don't know. But yeah, that's half my issue I have with the systemic when it comes to dealing with thrips. It can take, unless you specifically spray it on the actual bug itself, whatever new bugs are emerging, it's going to take a while for it to happen again. It's not been treated. It's only had one treatment, so it needs its next treatment and the next treatment after that, and hopefully by that it would have dealt with it. But I'm seeing, I caught it before I saw any damage. I saw the pests before I saw the damage. For once in my life, I was able to see the thrips before the damage started occurring. Does it mean that the thrip babies have not already been laid within the leaf? No. Does it mean I'm going to be watching this like a hawk? Yes, but that is the sad state of my white monster, the Kunzo white monster. Let's see if I can get this into anything that resembles an actual mature Monstera white monster. But yes, this is what I'm dealing with for right now. Yes, yes. Some other good news, and this is one that was, yeah. So this plant I had chopped back to pretty much nothing. I was going to get rid of this plant, but I'm just like, you know what? When I was chopping it to throw it into the compost bin, I saw that it actually still had some relatively viable roots on a part of its stem. So I'm just like, you know what? Chop it all off, leave the stem, shove you in some Anthurium soil mix, put you in a net pot. If you work, you work. If not, get dumped into the compost bin as well. But it has graced me with a singular leaf, and it doesn't look like what the mature leaves will look like ultimately, because I know what the mature leaves look like. I had it at that point. This is the Anthurium clavigerum. And for the people that might remember, I'll see if I can put a picture here. When I got this from Equigenera, this is one of the Anthuriums that has the leaves that look a bit like an umbrella. So with the multiple little leaflets on the one petiole. That's why I'm saying this is not what the mature leaf will look like. But it's got its first new leaf. I can already see that there's a growth point happening there. It seems super happy for now. So there's a root that's coming up at the bottom as well. So far, so good. Let's see how this does. I would have liked this to have happened like in May time, and it would have had the whole growing season to kind of maybe put in a bit more height and a few more leaves. But it's happened now just before we're going to go into autumn because, you know what, sod's law. But let's see what happens with the Anthurium clavigerum. But really happy that this is kind of bouncing back now. And then a little update from something that you probably haven't seen for a while. And yes, there are some crispy leaves on here as well, but there's also some new leaves that are happening here and here. This is still hardening off. These are part of my original seedlings, or when I did the pollination for my Anthuriums. It's one of the last few ones that remains. And I think this is the one that I pollinated. It's just good that this is surviving, and hopefully it will thrive because the mother plant I think is officially dead. This was from the plant that I bought as a metallicum, and as we've established over many years, probably wasn't a metallicum, it was something else. But I did love its long kind of like darkish leaves, and it was a happy grower for me. So with this, and it's now that it's starting to mature, because that's the problem. If you don't label your Anthurium pollinations or crosses, you won't know what the hell they are, especially because they all look quite similar when they are quite juvenile until they start sizing up a bit, which could take a while. This has been going on for like nearly 2 years. Granted, I've not been babying these seedlings particularly well, but yeah. This is, I think, based on what I'm seeing here, something that I got when I got pollen from that plant, what I thought was the metallicum, which we still don't know exactly what it is. There's a couple of people every so often that send me one, and there's one person that said they think they saw that plant at Kew Gardens. I've not been to Kew Gardens yet. They don't know what it was called, but I might be able to go and figure out, because it probably is that plant there, and just go, oh, that's probably what it was. So I pollinated it with itself. So hopefully this will look like its parent. It might not. I don't know how this type of genetics would work for the Anthurium, because if what I had was a hybrid and I pollinated it with itself, I would imagine it would still look like the parent plant, or I don't know with if it's a F1 hybrid, so first generation hybrid, whether or not I might see a slightly different version of my parent plant because some of its parent plant's genetics might be shining through. I don't know. But so far, it's so good. It's doing so well. And I think a lot of the updates that I have for you, I think there's 1 or 2 other updates that I have, again, from a prop box, because I finally opened my prop box and I'm just like, whoa, look, I've got things in here. Tend to be Anthuriums. There might be one that isn't an Anthurium. Oh, there is one more plant that I bought that I need to show you. Hold on. Apologies, me forgetting one of the biggest finds that I found at that local garden centre, which I never thought I was going to find. So this plant, and you can see it at the top there as well, it's got some new growth that's coming in. That's since being in my care. This was not mine. This came with its own kind of pole or plank. I did change the soil around it just because I know what my other plant is. This plant, so excited when I found this, and I don't think it was massively expensive. I don't think this was the cheapest plant that I bought, but I don't think it was massively expensive. This is the Rhaphidophora hongkongensis, the variegated form. I'm so happy. Because my green one is my kind of most quintessential feral plant child in this space. It grows everywhere. It's like a weed at this point. It's every nook and cranny. This is growing considerably slower, but it's also a much younger plant at this point. I think the hongkongensis took about a year to establish itself, and then it started growing like the clappers. It's interesting because obviously this one has got, its stems are a bit more flattened because it's used to growing on a plank. Whether or not I'm going to keep it doing this or whether or not I'm going to find another plank to put on, I don't know. I need to see if I can maybe give it another plank to grow on or extend this one up. How I'm going to do it, I don't know. Or whether or not I'm going to chop this and propagate it and then have a secondary one and then I can put it on its own plank. But you can kind of see, I would imagine, yes, that was the original cutting there. And I can see the cutting there. And then immediately when it started growing from that first cutting, you can see that it reverted back to more juvenile leaves, and then it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger as it goes on. And obviously they're getting a bit smaller now because they're off the plank. Another quick update plant again from the propagation box, and I've got this still in my propagation box. This is the Doc Block Anthurium Michelle, Zara X Michelle basically. And loads of baby leaves. It's got multiple growth points off that single one growth point. So let's see how this does. So story behind this. Most years it would struggle in the winter. It would lose most of its leaves, and then I would spend most of the summer rehabbing it. It would get like large-ish and then rinse and repeat every winter. This winter it got very close to dying. And at some point, I think it had one tiny little leaf left and 0 roots. And I'm just like, right, I'm going to shove you in the prop box. And this has been in there for nearly 3 to 6 months, somewhere along those lines. But it finally has some decent roots. It's finally getting loads of leaves on it. So I'm just like, you know what? I'm going to start transitioning you out. However, I wanted to give it a slightly bigger net pot. And I wanted to take it off its damp sphagnum moss because it makes me nervous outside of a prop box. So I have also transplanted this, took off the moss and transplanted this into tree fern fibre now. Just straight up tree fern fibre with a net pot. You might say, well, Memo, why is this still in your propagation bin? Because I had to jostle its roots. I put some new media. I given it a new pot. I don't want to change one more thing, which is bringing it out of the prop box and bringing it into this space. Because even though I've got really high humidity here, in this space, it's still not as high as it's going to be in my closed prop box. So this will stay in the prop box for at least another week. So I only did this yesterday. So we'll stay in for a week just so it can settle into its new growing media without having to change of the humidity. And then I'm going to slowly start transitioning it out. Normally I wouldn't baby my plants quite to this level, but I know that this is fussy. I don't know if it's just for me. If you've got the Zara X Michelle as well and you've had similar struggles, do let me know. If not, and it's been super easy for you, please tell me that as well and maybe what you do, because maybe I'm doing things wrong. But at the stage of this being in there for a week, it will come out for a few hours one day, go back in, it will come out for a few more hours the next day, and just hardening it off to the slight difference in humidity. And the good thing is, because I know what this was growing at in terms of light levels, and it was happy, I will see if I can find exactly the same light levels to put it in my space. It makes things a lot easier when I know that it's done this in a prop box. I can easily say, okay, what light level were you getting at this stage? Right, we will do the same here. So yes, Zara x Michelle hopefully might have made a comeback. Let's see, touch wood, and let's see how it goes. And then when I was taking that plant out, I saw something in the moss. Because you know my prop box is messy as nobody's business, basically. I'm growing moss more than I'm growing anything else in that prop box. But I've got better now at putting little net pots, so at least the actual plant is vaguely contained, so then I can at least move it into something a bit bigger and then move it out of there instead of it just growing wildly in the moss. And then I need to chop off roots whilst trying to get it out. This was another Anthurium where it was literally a stump. It had nothing left. All the roots had rotted out. There was just a tiny bit of stem left over. And it's now got at least a couple of roots in here and 3 leaves. And if I'm not mistaken, this is, and I'm going to kick myself. It's the one that you hybridize a lot of the times with the Queen Anthurium. I will find the name and put it at the top here. But it is making a comeback. So I'm really hoping that this comes back in a decent format, because I did enjoy growing this plant, and I actually found it quite a good grower and a fast grower. And considering that the last time I opened up the prop box, like probably about a month ago, there was no leaves on this, and it's since got 3 leaves and roots in it. High hopes for this one. So hopefully it will continue doing its thing in there. It will probably be in the prop box for at least another month or 2. I want to see more roots, and then I'll start the same transition that I was just talking about now with my Zara x Michelle for this one, to bring it finally into this space. But I think that's all the updates for now, and the little mini haul. Let me know what you thought. Did any of these surprise you? Did I show you any plants that you've not heard of before? Let me know down below. Again, any tips if you've grown any of these plants that you want to share with me, or if you want to tell me that closed vessel method for Alocasia is rubbish, please do so down below. I'd love to have that conversation. But as I said on previous videos, I'm all about trying to experiment a bit more this year. I have kind of been a bit lax on my experimenting with different ways of growing things for a while now, so let's see how it goes. But yes, hopefully you've enjoyed. Hopefully I shall see you here soon, and I truly, truly hope that you have a great rest of your day. Thanks. Bye.